Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study entitled Three Marys. And we're going to conclude our study of Mary Magdalene today. We'll take one more session to just kind of remind ourselves of what we learned from these women next time before we begin our next study. But we're in John chapter 20 today, and this is the personal encounter between Mary and the risen Lord. And it's one of the great moments in all of Scripture, um, and it's the moment that tells us that the iceberg that we get the tip of is pretty big. That there was a real abiding connection between Jesus and his disciples. Mary being one of those disciples, and it's something that we can have with him too. Something that is quite personal that's between us and him. And we see Mary had that moment today. John 20 verses 1 through, we're going to read all the way through verse 18. Let's not forget John's writing as an old man. John's writing at the end of the first century. John is filling in the blanks, connecting dots, giving us stories we don't have yet because they weren't written down in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And this is one of them. The first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was still dark, which means it's still the Sabbath, and she saw the stone already taken away from the tomb. So she ran and came to Simon Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved, which is John, of course, and said to them, "They've taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Peter therefore went forth, and the other disciple, and they were going to the tomb, and they were running together. The other disciple ran faster than Peter, and came to the tomb first, and stooping, looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. Simon Peter also came, following him, and entered the tomb. And behold, the linen wrappings lying there, and the face cloth, which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. And then entered in the other disciple who had first come to the tomb, and he saw and believed. And of course, he's speaking about himself, remembering back that moment that he entered the empty tomb, the very empty tomb, and saw the body cloth kind of piled up over here, but the face cloth rolled up neatly over there, and then believing. As yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. So the disciples went away to their own homes, Mary standing outside the tomb, weeping. And so as she wept, she stooped and looked in the tomb. And she saw two angels in white, sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been lying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "Because they've taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they put him." When she had said this, she turned around, and behold, Jesus was standing there, but she didn't know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means my teacher. It means more than that. It's a diminutive possessive ending. It means my little teacher, my special teacher, my own teacher. Jesus said to her, "Stop clinging to me. I've not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I ascend to my Father and your Father, my God and your God." Mary Magdalene came announcing to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her. There's just so much that's important, and it's such a private moment. You feel like almost like an intruder, but then blessed to be there to see it. She's there. She can't bring herself to leave, and the angels speak to her, and She has to know they are angels. She sees they're not people. Um, but she wants to know what they've done. And in her despair, she doesn't recognize that she's talking to angels and that they and then she turns and Jesus is there, but she doesn't recognize him as Jesus. I've heard people say she's crying. That's true. An ugly crying. That's true. People have said, oh, she would have turned, she would have been facing the east, and the sun would have been in her eyes. Well, yeah, probably. It's early morning, maybe Jesus's form wasn't exactly. Remember in the next chapter when he's on the beach, now they're looking at him from a distance, but the disciples don't know right off that they're talking to Jesus. But then there's voice recognition. In the whole passage, we're given the Greek form of Mary's name. Mari, 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 Mari. But then when Jesus says her name in the Greek text, it's in Aramaic, Hebrew. It's exactly the phrase, the word Jesus would have used, the very way Jesus would have said her name. It's almost a way of recording his voice so that we hear exactly what he said when he said it. He says, Mariam, and she hears him speak her name and recognizes his voice. And she clings to him. The thing that she says before, it just tears me every time I read it. Jesus is a grown man when he dies. And yet she says, tell me where you put him, and I will lift him up. I will bear him up. I'll bring him back. I'll take care. I'll haul him. That word agero, to lift up, it's the word for resurrection. I mean, there's a double meaning there that she doesn't even understand, but we, the reader, can see the sweet connection of it, the words that she chooses to use. And he says, don't cling to me. I don't think he's saying, you're a clingy woman, leave me alone. I think he's saying, listen, it's not time for this. Right now is the time to get the work done. I have work to do and you have work to do. Things have to happen before I can go back up to my Father in heaven. So let's get going on this. Go tell my disciples. And what she says to them, it really connects with what Martha says in John 11 about Jesus. When he asked, do you believe this? And she said, yes, Lord, I have believed. And she uses the perfect tense. And and it means I believed it. I believed it yesterday. I believe it today. I'll believe it tomorrow. I'll believe it forever. My belief is absolute. It's perfect. It's complete. Nothing's going to change the fact that I believe you are who you are, and I know who you are. When she says, I have seen the Lord, she uses the perfect tense. I saw him. I saw him when he was with us, and I saw him today, and I will see him from now on. I can't unsee him. I have seen the Lord. He is risen. I have seen him. It that image will never leave. It will shape everything that I am from now on. And that's what she says. And of course, this says a lot about Jesus too, and about the tender way he cares for his disciples, all of them individually, personally. We'll talk more about that next time now that I've taken nearly 10 minutes of your time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.